Dr. PegLuksik has been one of the most active, accomplished, and influential moms in recent Pennsylvania history. A busy mother of 6, some of them homeschooled, and a special education teacher, Peg has always had a passion for education. The federal effort to implement outcome-based education in the 80s galvanized Peg to inform parents about the significant concerns related to the content, academic quality, and federal extension of control in OBE. To give parents a voice in education and public policy, Dr. Luksik formed the Pennsylvania Parents Commission and later the National Parents Commission. Dr. Luksik had worked for the U.S. Department of Education as a consultant on educational reform initiatives. However, after she successfully led the opposition to OBE in this state, her services were no longer required. But the influence that she was able to extend to many parents across the state in giving them the truth about outcome-based education was very effective. She co-authored a book, Outcome-Based Education, The State's Assault on Our Children's Values, and also lobbied and testified in Harrisburg. She also had the opportunity to be a host on a nationally syndicated educational TV program called The Learning Curve on Net TV. A champion of constitutional conservative political policies, Dr. Luksik also ran for governor in 1990 and 1994 and U.S. Senate in 2010 to extend the message of common sense, fiscally responsible, constitutional solutions to problems in our state and nation. Currently, she has formed the organization Founded on Truth to continue that work. And all of that while she was rearing 6 wonderful children. So thank you very much, Dr. Luksik, for being with us, and welcome to CCT. First time I ever had to give a speech, I stood up and the podium was taller than I was. So now I don't stand behind the podium anymore, and I wear big high heels. As you heard, I am a mother of 6. They are all girls except for 5 of them. It's an IQ joke. How fast did you go? And I recently became a grandmother, which I have to say is the most wonderful thing on the planet. And since I have 5 boys, I have a granddaughter, which I thought was really very thoughtful. I want to talk to you before we start. Let me give you kind of an outline of what we're going to do. I'm going to give you some basic pedagogy, which is the science of education, so that everything fits together. Then we're going to do what they're doing, and then we're going to look at some of the grant proposals, just so you have a network to fit the information into. The organization is founded on truth, and at the end I'm going to give you 2 pieces of paper. Everything that I am going to be talking to you about will be or is on the Founded on Truth website, so you will be able to access information. Some of what I'm talking to you about, I'm reading through grant proposals that are 1,000 pages long. It will take me a while to put them together into something that's easily disseminated. So while I'll be talking to you from them, the website will eventually have something that you can pull down and share with others. That being said, let's start with the pedagogy. Now, as you heard, I have taught special ed. I've also taught regular education. I've taught everything from preschool through college, have written curriculum, designed curriculum, and evaluated curriculum. When I was in grad school, part of my duties for my fellowship were to actually work in and then teach in a testing facility attached to the university that did psychometric testing. So I have administered those tests, I have scored those tests, I have reported the results of those tests. So I know what psychometric testing is because I did it. And in some cases it is really appropriate. If you have a child that has a serious educational problem or emotional problem, you do need to find out why. Just like if you have a physical problem, they do an MRI and an X-ray. There is a time and a place for that kind of serious testing. But it is serious testing. And there is a time and a place not to have it as well. So just to give you kind of a background on that. Let's start with some of the basics of education, things that every educational program does and has to do, and they're not bad things. And that is the relationship between standards, testing, and curriculum. They have to be related. Let me give you an example. I'm teaching 3rd grade. In 3rd grade, typically in basic education, we teach times tables. So the standard, all the 3rd graders will know their times tables. If I don't set that as a standard, then I don't have anything to teach to. So the first thing every good teacher does is decide, what do I want my students to learn? They have to learn something. And how well do I want them to know it? That's the standard. Sometimes we call that the objective. Now that I've decided that, how will I find out that they actually know what I've taught them? That's the test. So this is times tables. Perhaps I will bring them in and have them recite all of their times tables to me. When a couple of my little ones were in 3rd grade, the principal of the school brought them in and they had to recite in order all of the times tables. And if they did that, they came home with a little certificate, and if they were a boy, they were a knight of the times table, and if they were a girl, they were a dame of the times table. And so it was kind of a cool thing that the 3rd graders did, and they had to do it in front of the principal. So it was a big deal that you could actually do this. That's a legitimate test. Perhaps I give them a flashcard test. One year when I was teaching 3rd grade, I made my bulletin board. I told the kids the story of Tom Sawyer and painting the fence. And I made a big bulletin board with a blank on the fence for every student in the class, and all the fence posts were empty. And if they could go through a flashcard drill of every single times table in random order, within a certain amount of time, they could decorate the blank on their fence. By the end of the year, every kid had made it. That's a legitimate way. Perhaps I give them a paper and pencil times table test. That's a legitimate way. In some measure, I have to test to know if they met my standard. Well, now that I know what I want them to learn, and then I know how I'm going to test them, the next thing I need to do is teach them so that they meet my objective to my standard. That's curriculum. So the standard and the testing and the curriculum must be connected, or you do not have education. Is that a bad thing? No, it's unavoidable. I have a son who's an architect. He must build a building that will withstand gravity. You can't build a building in a place where there isn't gravity. Well, you can't have education in a place where you don't have a standard and a test and a curriculum, or it's not education. That's not evil. It's just the way it is. Now, when education was local, you knew what the standards were. You could go in and talk to the teacher about it. If there was an issue that you had, that you wanted your child to go beyond the standard, or perhaps there was a reason that they couldn't actually meet the standard, the teacher was free to work with you on that. So one of my students, he's now an opera singer, but when he was in 3rd grade, he decided he wanted to play the saxophone. He couldn't actually hold the saxophone because it was too heavy, so we had to sit in front of him and he had to sit down so that the saxophone weight could be there. But I went into the school and said, this child has a lot of musical talent, and I know you don't really let them in the band in 3rd grade, but could you do that? And the school said that, yes, he's doing well in his studies, so we can work that out for you. Now, if he had been a D student, they probably would have said, we have another issue that we need to talk about. That's what happens when parents and teachers work together at the local level. You have that kind of flexibility, and kids learn when you have that. So while we have standards in testing and curriculum, when education happens at the local level, we adapt for the kids in our classroom. And good teachers have done that forever. And good parents have worked with good teachers to make that happen too. And probably many of you did that for one or another of your own children. Now, let's go to the next level. Oh, cool. It's much easier. And I'm fun, so I would probably check it. Let's say I have a classroom and the child doesn't meet my standard on the first test, which often happens. Kids fall. What do? I have to, in some way, remediate that child. I have to fix it. What went wrong in this picture? How do I fix it? And then how do I test them again to make sure that it is in fact fixed? Now, have you ever gone through that experience? Yes, you have. Have you ever been on the phone with a telemarketer?
Yeah.
So I'm the telemarketer, and you shouldn't sit in the front. I use you as examples all the time. I just called you. I am selling purple shoes. I think purple shoes are the most amazing thing on the planet, and I work for a company that markets purple shoes. And I call you and I say, hi, and how are you today? And do you like the color purple? And you say yes or no. There she goes. Oh, she's a good customer. Do you buy shoes? Do you wear shoes? Yes or no? That's an important thing to know. Do you buy the shoes for your family? Or does somebody else buy the shoes? I want to know that. That's called a pre-test. Where are you right now? Because I need to know where you are so that I know what to say next. Now that I've established the pre-test, I'm going to give you my sales pitch. That's the curriculum. I'm teaching you something. I'm teaching you all about how you really want purple shoes. When I'm all done teaching you, I say, so can I put that on your Visa or your MasterCard? That's the assessment. Now, if you say Visa, congratulations. You may graduate from this conversation. But if you say no, I say, oh, what's your objection? And you tell me, and then I answer you. That's remediation. You did it wrong. You didn't say Visa or MasterCard, I'm sorry. You flunked the assessment. Say, she flunked. So,
I'll let you speak because I'm hearing them.
You're very polite, yes. She's like most people. So I'm going to go around again. That's remediation. And when I'm done remediating you, I've answered your objections, I say, so can I put that on your Visa or your MasterCard? That's a re-assessment. And if you say Visa or MasterCard, you can graduate from the conversation. Now, it sounds like you're like most people. You'll probably let me go around twice and then say, okay, that's enough. A child in the classroom cannot hang up the phone. So if you put them in a remediation reassessment loop, they can't leave until they meet the outcome to the standard. Now, if we're talking about a local school where the outcome that we're talking about is times tables, that's wonderful, because you actually do want them to learn their times tables. But if the outcome is something very different, that circle still remains. Now, when we get into the Common Core standards, you're going to hear all about how these are rigorous, internationally benchmarked standards that every child will meet. Really. Can I set a standard that every child will meet? Yes, I certainly can. Stand up. Everybody stand up. You didn't know there was a physical exercise tonight. Okay, this standard, for the purposes of our conversation, is vocal performance. So when you can meet my standard, you may sit down. But you may not sit down until you can reach the standard. You ready? Luciano Pavarotti. Anybody who can sing as well as Luciano Pavarotti, who is considered the greatest tenor of the 20th century, may sit down. Okay. A regular soloist with the New York Metropolitan Opera. Chorus member with the New York Metropolitan Opera. Soloist with a regional symphony. Chorus member with a regional symphony. Soloist with a church choir. Sings in the church choir. Sings in the shower and enjoys it. Can't carry a tune in a bucket. Can't find the bucket. We still have somebody singing. Now, where was the standard where most of you sat down? Sings in the shower and enjoys it. I am a teacher in a classroom. According to the Common Core standards, I as the teacher am required to make every child reach the common standard. Where is the standard going to be? At sings in the shower and enjoys it, because that's where you all sat down. Where am I as the teacher going to spend all my time? Working with our gentleman here who can't find a bucket to get him up to sings in the shower and enjoys it. What about the child for whom the standard should have been? Have run. According to this system, reward and punishment is based upon meeting the Common Core standard to the outcome prescribed by the state's assessment. Teachers can be fired if they do not have their students meet the standard at the level of the assessment. There is no reward, there is no incentive for going beyond the assessment. So what happens to education? Comes down. And what do the teachers do? They bring the bottom to the middle. Let's look at it another way. Everybody look at your lap. Pretend there's a string running across your lap. You all see the string? In traditional education, the teacher picks the string up and carries it along behind her. The string, so I'm at the end and you're pulling the string across your lap. The part of the string that's in the teacher's hand is the brightest kids in the class. You remember, they were the ones that you hated when the grading happened on the curve, because they always got an A. And then they didn't see with the C. And everybody hated them. Because they're the kids, they learned it almost before it came out of the teacher's mouth. Those were those kids. Those kids were in the middle, and then you had the kids who were kind of at the bottom. But the whole string moved across your lap. How does that look in a regular classroom? Let's go back to our multiplication example. So it's third grade, and we're teaching times tables, and the brightest kids, almost before the teacher has said all the times tables, are able to do all the flashcards the very first day, within the time. True, there they are, they're minus 7. I have a son who is graduating in 20 days. He is a double engineering major at Wider University, and he is a 3/8. When we taught him how to tell time, we began by saying, this is the hour, here's the half hour on an analog clock. Here's quarter after, here's quarter till. And he went, oh, so on a digital clock, that's 15, 30, 45. He was 5 years old, and we all went, right? Good for you. Almost before you say it, it was out of his mouth. Because the numbers were his friends and his were his friends. So we always have those kids. Now, the first time you have, so here we are in our third grade class, you walk through. Some kids are going to flunk the multiplication test that first time, and the second time, and the third time, and the fourth time. And now it's January. And the kids at the top of the class are doing 23 times 46 correctly. And the kids at the bottom are not doing 23 times 46, but they now are doing 7 times 8 correctly every time. They get there slower, but because the whole class is moving, they're moving too. And the string is stretched out behind you. And in a regular classroom, a teacher normally teaches the high average, the top of the average pool, because you can supplement the brightest kids and you can remediate the lower kids, but the class continues to move along at a reasonable clip. And the whole string eventually moves across your lap. In this system, put the string back in the middle of your lap. You'll see the string? In this system, the teacher is going to go to the other end and push the string, because she has to bring the bottom up before the top can move. Will the top ever move? No. That's why standards go down. And that is basic pedagogy. It is how the education works. Now let's talk about assessment. Now, most of you look like you are been out of school for a while. So when you were a kid, and when your kids were young, you remember that you took, or your children took, what was the Iowa Test of Basic Skills, the Stanford Test of Basic Skills. There was a third company, the name of which I can never remember. Say it again? There you go, the California Test. How did those happen? You were such a nice person, I'll let you get it first. Okay, here is the school system. Here he is, he's got his hat on, isn't this wonderful? He's School District A. School District B. Testing Company. So here's Mr. Testing Company. I need you to get up, actually. Testing Company comes to School District A. This is the High Spire School District. The average income's $100,000. Testing Company says, I'm going to sign a contract with you. I'm going to administer the test. You're going to pay me $100. School District, you hand him $100. There you go. He takes the $100, puts it in his pocket. He goes down the road to the Outer Podunk School District, where the average income is $10,000. He says, I'm going to administer my test. You're going to pay me $100. Hand him $100. Puts $100 in his pocket. Here he is, he's the tester. He goes home with his $100 and his $100. He has $100 from each district in his pocket. Do you know anybody in that district? No. Do you know anybody in that district? Do you care about those kids in those districts? No. You made your $100. That's how capitalism works, right? He made his $100 and his $100. He designs his test. The Iowa test, the California test, the Stanford test, they were achievement tests. You could look at this year's test because that's achievement. But you could look at last year's test and the year before, the year before, the year before, the year before. So the teachers knew, in third grade, you're going to test times tables. I should probably teach times tables because he's going to be testing. And you come back to the school district with the same test. You hand them the test. You hand them the test with directions to give out the test. That was wonderful. Now, if you remember your kids, they came home and said, it was really weird, Mom. We had a different person come in and administer the test. So the first grade teacher wasn't in the room in the first grade when they took the test. Maybe the junior high teacher came down. It was a proctor. Why did they do that? Thank you, you can sit down. It was a proctor. Why? The proctor came in and read the words on the paper, and the proctor didn't know anybody in the first grade. So, they didn't care. They had no interest in that child as an individual because they had no relationship with that child. The proctor came in, read the words on the page verbatim, said you have 45 minutes to do these questions. Are there any questions in this room? Good, start. And then the proctor sat there and stared at you for 45 minutes while the kids took the test. And at the end, the proctor said, pencils down. When the tests were all done, the high-aspired school district packaged them up and delivered them to you in the mail, or you had a representative pick them up. The Outer Podunk School District picked them up. Here you are. You scored them. Totally not near the school district. He doesn't care how they did. Why doesn't he care? He got paid $100 by both districts. His relationship was $100. That was all. He goes back and says, here's the results. Blah, blah. That's called an external audit. The person doing the assessment, the audit, has no relationship to either district other than they paid him the same. Impartial. Whether you got your kid scored 90% or 2%, he made $100. That's an outside audit. Now, tests have to be certain things. They have to be valid. What does that mean? It means they actually test what they say they're going to test. So if I say this is a multiplication test, and you open the book, you had better see times tables. That's a valid test. They have to be reliable. What does that mean? You get the same results every time. That's why when they test a drug, you have to do it over so many different people over a certain amount of time so that they know the results are the same, because you get anomalies. I have a very odd metabolism. So the first time I had surgery, you know, they put the pentothal in and they say count back from 100. 75, 74, 73. Is anything supposed to happen here? The doctor walked in and said, you lied about your weight. I said, oh, for heaven's sakes, look at me. How could I possibly lie about my weight? That's ridiculous. They had to piggyback the pentothal. I had to have 2 IVs to get me to go to sleep. And an hour later in the recovery room, I'm talking to the nurse. And she looks at me like I'm from Mars. And I said, oh, I think I'm making sense, but I'm not making sense, right? And she said, no, you are. And in this room, nobody makes sense. In this room, people sound like that man over there. And I look over and there's a man there going, Mr. So-and-so. He's going, rah, 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 rah. I'm having a conversation. The doctor went in and went, go home. I am not a reliable indicator for medication because my body does weird things with it. That's why you have to test it over so many people. Okay, what does that mean for education? The argument that you hear is that the Iowa tests were bad because they weren't reliable. Okay, if you are talking about one child, that is accurate. I had one of my sisters when she was little, this school, when we had to take exams, and she flunked every one. And my sister was an AP student, and the nun called my mom and said, and my mother went, I don't know. And a day later, she broke out in the measles. Well, now we know why she flunked the test, right? Because she was sick. So was the test a reliable measurement for her? No. So when you give the Iowa test or any of those achievement tests, it may not be reliable for that one child. Because you could have a kid who's sick, or you just have to guess right. You know, like somebody actually wins the lottery. But in terms of a school district, it is very reliable. because the odds of every kid in one district having either a good day or a bad day on the same day are 0. So for a school district, those tests were a valid and reliable outside audit.
I'm on her list.
We don't do those tests anymore. Now, the government administers the test. What does that mean? It means the government sets the standards. The government writes the test that is based on the standards that they set. The government gives you the curriculum. The government administers their test. The tests go back to the government. They score their own tests. And then they report their own results. If you were a bank, would you give a business a loan based on that kind of data? Neither would I.
Thank you.
So, for example, just about a month ago in Atlanta, you may have heard, the superintendent of Atlanta, who was named Educator of the year before, was not only fired but arrested because they falsified the data on the test. Oh, that would never happen here. Here in Pennsylvania, we're in the middle of an investigation in which they have uncovered more than 140 instances where the data has been tampered with. Teachers erased wrong answers, put in right answers. The Department of Education, back in the 90s, I was debating a representative of the department, and she, in the middle of the debate, said, well, you know, we're no longer changing the standards for what is passing. And I said, well, what? Did you just publicly admit that you've been lying to everybody and the Department of Education was skewing the data? Well, we're not going to do it anymore. I said, well, until a minute ago, nobody knew you were doing it in the first place. Except now you've just told us that all of the stuff you told us was untrue. Because the fox is running the hen house. It's an internal audit. Now, there's more ways than that than you can skew the data. When they did the PSSA, I actually went in, because I was a pain, and got permission to read them all. So I'm sitting in the Department of Education reading the state assessment. It was the reading assessment. The story was about a child who found a wallet filled with money, and then what did the child do with the money in the wallet? Okay. You read the story. Get to the questions. One of the questions. If you, the student, found a wallet with money in it, would you keep the money? Do you read better if you say yes? Or do you read better if you say no? Or were they not testing reading? That is not a valid assessment. Except you didn't get to see the test. Because the tests are secret. And if you go in and ask to see, the tests that they're using are what's called a matrix assessment system. What's a matrix? You ever play Chinese checkers? You start with 10 marbles, and that's your sort of team. That's a matrix. So there were actually 10 different tests. But if you as a parent went in to see them, you got to see one. That was not necessarily the one that your child took. So you didn't really know what they were asking. That's not a valid assessment. They were testing something that they didn't tell you they were testing. California gave their test at the 5th grade, 8th grade, 11th grade level. Nobody was allowed to have the test, so I had them. And read them. I read them all at once. And thought, this is weird. Something's not right here, but I can't figure out what it is. So I read them again. And then I put them side by side by side, and I realized they were all written at the same reading level. The 8th grade reading level. So the 5th graders would have real trouble because the test was too hard. The 8th graders would test right on grade level. And the 11th graders would look like they had just done amazingly well because they took an 8th grade test. But nobody knew that because nobody was allowed to have the test. And if you were the teacher at the 5th grade level, you wouldn't see what was happening at the 8th grade level, so you wouldn't know that the tests were at the same readability. And if you were the teacher at the 11th grade level, you only saw your grade, so you didn't know it was the same as an 8th grade level. Now, the stories were different, the questions were different, but the readability level, how hard it was to read it, was the same. So parents at the 11th graders were told, wow, they're scoring at the proficient or advanced level, but they weren't told, yeah, on an 8th grade test. That's not valid either, is it? But you have no way to know that, because everything is inside. In an internal audit, I can skew the data. Now understand, I am not condoning cheating. I am not condoning cheating. But we are putting teachers and principals in this system in a position where they are being told, if your students or your building does not meet our standards, you will lose money as a district, or you may lose your job. And you remember those 6 children? I had this rule when they were little. I tried really hard not to take them someplace that I knew I was going to spank them when I got there. We all do that as parents. I want you to bring your children to a formal dinner that will last for 4 hours. No. They will not know how to behave. I will have to punish them. That would be stupid. Did you ever see My Fair Lady? Yeah. I love Eliza Doolittle's father. You know, the one who sings the song, when temptation comes, I give right in. Because that's who we all are. How do we know that? Did you ever say to our Father? Get to the end. Lead us not into temptation. Why did the good Lord put that in that prayer? Because we're all Eliza Doolittle's father. I'm on a diet, that's a brownie. Just 1 or 7. I won't tell. I'll run 2 more miles tomorrow, or 2 more steps. Because that's human nature. So we're putting educators in an impossible position. And then we wonder why they behave badly. That's not fair. That's not fair. Now, that's kind of the basic pedagogy. So what are they really doing? There's a lot of rhetoric happening about what's going on in the Common Core standards. Tons and tons and tons of it. If you want to know what's really happening, ignore all of the rhetoric. There's one place that you should look. You should always look at what does any state who wants money from the federal government, what do they tell the federal government? You know, when you're applying for something, whether it's a loan, or getting your credit changed, or tuition assistance, or the FAFSA, you know, if you have kids in college, what do they ask for? They ask for your tax return. Why? Because you didn't lie to the federal government, because you could go to jail if you did. So they figured that is the place where you are where they're most likely to get honest information about your income. What did you tell the federal government? Well, the states apply for federal money. If you want to know what they either did do or what they're going to do, find the application. What did they tell the federal government that they did do or that they're going to do? So where did Pennsylvania apply for the money, and where did the Common Core standards come from? They are neither Democrat nor Republican. In the 80s, we had George Bush the Senior, and he called it Goals 2000. And then we had Bill Clinton, and he called it America 2000, but nothing changed. And then we had George Bush the Jr., and he called it No Child Left Behind, but nothing changed. And now we have Barack Obama, and he calls it Race to the Top. Nothing has changed. No Child Left Behind created a nightmare. Teachers complained, districts complained, parents complained, states complained. It cost a fortune, and it didn't work. How do we know it didn't work? Well, we've been tinkering around with having all these rigorous educational reforms now since the 1980s, right? We spent a ton of money. You'd think something would have happened. It didn't. This is from 2011. This is the comparative math scores. It ranks all of the kind of industrialized nations in the world. Grade 4, top nation is Singapore. The United States was 12th out of 26. Grade 8, top nation was Singapore. United States scored 28 out of 41. We're behind countries like Bulgaria, In grade 12, the United States scored 19th out of 21. Oh, top nation was the Netherlands. All the nations don't have a grade 12, so the education system's a little different. So the score, Singapore doesn't count grade 12 the way we do, so they're not on the list at all. They didn't do poorly, they just have a different education system. And we scored 19th out of 21 in 2011. So we spent $1 bajillion. Federal government has been ever more involved, and we're at the bottom of the pile. Wouldn't you think maybe we should do something different? No. We need more federal government. So the states started complaining their heads off about No Child Left Behind, and Congress was getting ready to pass some legislation. There was actually a move to get Congress to pass legislation telling the U.S. Department of Education, would you get out of the way? Stop this. So the Obama administration said, well, we really don't want that to happen. So we're going to give the states a waiver to No Child Left Behind. They won't have to abide by it if they go into the race to the top competition. And of course, they did, because they were trying to get out of No Child Left Behind. And Pennsylvania did as well. Everybody wasn't guaranteed money under Race to the Top. There were 3 phases of competition. In the first phase, only Delaware and Tennessee got money. Well, Pennsylvania submitted a phase 1 application. It was over 200 pages long, and then there were the appendixes. In phase 2, 10 states got money. Pennsylvania did. But we submitted a phase 2 application that was over 300 pages long, and the appendixes were nearly 1,000 pages long. In phase 3, Pennsylvania got money. That application was misleading. It was only 40-some pages long, but when you read through it, which I actually did read it, at the top it says, this refers to these pages of the phase 2 application. So this is how far along we are in implementing phase 2. So it was really phase 2s, that doesn't even sound right. Application updated. And we got money. Once you get money, the application is a contract. Because now money has changed hands. Like any contract. I'm going to do this if you pay me. Once you pay me, I have to do it. Or I'm in breach. So the applications become legally binding documents. So if you want to know what the state is up to, you should read the contracts. They're very boring. They're very long. What I'm going to be doing in the upcoming weeks is putting the contracts so you don't have to read 321 pages of contract and 900 plus pages of appendix into something that makes some sense for you. So tonight, what I did was I took the phase 2 because it's kind of the middle one, and I'm just going to walk you through it a piece at a time. Obviously, we're not doing 321 pages because that's not how much this is. Let's start with the Common Core standards. They are not owned by a government agency. They are owned by the National Governors Association and the Council of Chief State School Officers. And they have a website, and the Common Core standards are copyrighted. And their website originally said that you could only display the Common Core standards for purposes that support the Common Core standards. Let me say that again. You were only given a license to copy, publish, distribute, and display the Common Core state standards for purposes that support the Common Core state standards. So if you didn't like them, you weren't allowed to use them. You weren't allowed to talk about them. You weren't allowed to display them. Now that's an open initiative, isn't it? Guess a bunch of people complained because they changed their website. So now their new website says that they can terminate or suspend anybody's access to the website at any time, and you can only use the site for purposes expressly permitted by the site. Which brings you back to support. Except now they don't say it's support. They say, well, you can only use our stuff if we give you permission to use our stuff. But yet every kid is going to be subjected to this. But you're not allowed to display them unless you're in favor of them. There's openness. Okay, so Pennsylvania submitted its Race to the Top application, which was quite lovely. And the first thing that it does, every application, this is called an assurance page. Now you can't, you're not going to be able to read all the words, but just so you can see, it has all the little boxes. The governor has to sign it, the Secretary of Education has to sign it, and the President of the State Board of Education has to sign it. They each have their own signature page. So there's 3 pages that look like this. One has the governor's signature, one has the secretary's, one has the state board's. This is the state board's page. And each of them say, to the best of my knowledge and belief, all of the information and data in this application are true and correct. I further certify that I have read the application, am fully committed to it, and will support its implementation. That's pretty plain. This is, we're doing this. And they each have to sign it. Now, this is the phase 2, and the President of the State Board of Education signed it on May 28, 2010. I am committed to it, we're doing it. The State Board had not yet adopted the Common Core standards, but they told the federal government they were doing it before the state adopted it. How could it be a state initiative if they were already certifying to the feds? This is a yes before it went through the state process, not a state initiative. This is page 3 of the contract. Didn't take us long to break that, did it? Well, what does it say? Now, I don't usually read, and I'm going to sort of talk you through these. The first thing that we have is a set of definitions, and they define the K-12 standards. They say it's a set of content standards that define what students must know and be able to do, and are substantially identical across all states in a consortium. That's not a state initiative either. The state can supplement the standards, but the supplement can't include more than 15%. Why did they allow that? Because Pennsylvania has a requirement that you teach Pennsylvania history, as well as U.S. history, and Utah, surprise, has a requirement that you teach Utah history, and Maryland has a requirement that you teach Maryland history. And some states have requirements about smoking education, or AIDS education, or a particular like phys ed thing. So that's 15%. That's their nod to the state having its own way. Increased learning time, longer school day, school week, or school year to significantly increase the total number of school hours. They're not doing a good job with the hours that they have. They want more hours. And in fact, we'll get back to that later on. They would like to expand learning time a minimum of 300 hours per school year. Participating LEAs. LEAs are local educational associations. Those are local educational associations or school districts that have chosen to implement this Common Core program. How do they choose to implement it? They sign a memorandum of understanding, which is a legally binding document, and it has no opt-out provision. How do I know that? It says it in the grant application. Once you sign in, you can't sign out. Wasn't there somebody here from Quakertown?
Yes.
Are you Quakertown Community School District?
Yes.
Yep.
You've already signed in.
Yes.
There's no opt-out. Pardon me? I have a whole list. I have every school district that has an LEA signed. Okay. The LEAs, local education, the school districts have to sign what is called a scope of work description. That will require you to have the signatures of your superintendent, the president of your school board, the president of the teachers' unions. They have to say how they're going to keep the money going after the money from the grant runs out. And they have to say that they're going to decrease achievement gaps between subgroups of students. And we're going to get that. Subgroups is important. We're going to come back to that. What it says here, the federal government requires applications of like Part A, Part B, Part C, Part D, and in each part then the feds tell you, this is what you have to do, and if you do it, we'll give you this many points toward getting the money. Remember, race to the top is a competition. And then each state says, this is what we did to prove that we are being compliant, so we get points. Pennsylvania says that our own state standards were clear and substantive, and our state assessments used to measure student knowledge are considered among the most rigorous. We're going to not do that anymore. We're going to go to the Common Core and the multi-state standards, and we're also going to use a data quality campaign so that we, because the data system can give teachers and administrators student-level data at an individual level. They tell the feds that they're going to double the rate of improvement in student performance. They're going to add 100,000 more students to the ranks of proficient or beyond in reading and math. They're going to cut the achievement gap by 60%, and they're going to boost the graduation rate to 93%. We're going to double the rate of improvement by 2014. Remember, you don't take your kids to a place where you know you're going to spank them when you get there? How does that translate in a local classroom? And what if the classroom doesn't do it? What is the pressure brought on that principal or that teacher who isn't meeting that impossible standard? They say that every one of the participating districts understands that they have to reach the student performance targets in each of their school buildings. They're going to provide the U.S. Department of Education with the greatest possible assurance that it can have confidence in the commitments that our school districts made. We require them to sign the memorandum of understanding, and 122 districts have done so. So have many of the charter schools. So if you think you're escaping by putting your child in a charter school, they've all signed these as well. That's how they get their money. It says Pennsylvania will adopt the Common Core standards. They're a member of the Common Core Initiative. They're part of the 3 national consortia. The Pennsylvania State Board of Education is poised to adopt the standards through an expedited review process. Normally when you change a regulation, education or any other, there's a whole process you have to go through with public hearings, and there's a time lag. But there is allowed to be an expedited process. It's called a response omitted process. Basically, you get rid of public hearings. And usually that's if there's an emergency. A nuclear plant blew up and we need to change regulations to clean it up. Well, then we need to get that done very quickly. This was treated as an emergency. So it went through a expedited review process, basically circumventing public outcome, and they're already telling them that they're going to adopt these by August of 2010. The state board actually first passed them in July of 2010. They actually did that. It requires all local schools to adhere to the standards, and all districts and charter schools will teach according to the standards. Some of the rhetoric that you hear is that, well, it's just standards, it's not curriculum. Remember the pedagogy? If the goal is times tables, what's going to happen in my classroom? Times tables. Standards always drive curriculum. They have what's called a standards aligned system. It's a website that allows teachers to access the academic standards and then drill down, that means move down from the standard, to find the content to be used in the classroom. Yes, sir.
I'm sorry, I'm 73 years old. My hearing is eroding quickly. I find the acoustics deficient and do not meet my standard. That being said, this organization is about constitutional government. You spoke for 45 minutes without ever bringing up the term Common Core. You explain all the techniques of teaching, but the fact I always viewed, what I had viewed in the past, the teaching profession. But we must recognize now that it's the teaching industry, is a better point, driven by unions, progressives, populists, and to a large extent, racists. But this is a time to become angry. I'm not talking about how bad it is now. The last thing I think of everybody was disappointed with the election. And I salute you for being responsible in terms of your own government and the nature of your own society. But this organization should get angry. We need to be insurrectionists instead of apologists. And I'm sorry, I have to go. Hello.
Okay. So the standards, according to the contract, are in fact driving content. And what you hear is that the standards do not drive content. What you hear when you're debating or when you're having a conversation is, no, these are just Common Core standards. They don't have anything whatsoever to do with the content in the classroom. The application says yes, they do. Yes, in fact, they do. It says that they're going to align all the curriculum to the Common Core standards. And it says it right in the application. It says we already have, in fact, developed a longitudinal data system through pre-kindergarten, elementary, secondary schools, post-secondary education, into the workforce. Let me say that again. A longitudinal data system that follows the progress of students through pre-kindergarten, elementary, secondary, post-secondary, and into the workforce. Already exists. Are the students identified at the individual level? Yes, they each have an ID number. And it says it right in the grant. That's important. That's important. They also have the same information on the teachers. On the teachers. Why is that important? I'm the student. You're the teacher. I don't comply. You don't make me. And neither does anybody else in your class. I can now use the state can use the data system to say all of the students in Mrs. Blankenschmiel's class here are not complying with the state standard. I can hold her accountable. The teachers have unique identifying numbers as well. Every teacher has the same data system attached to them. They can tell you how many times did this teacher access the system-aligned portal, web page, to use the curriculum that we at the state are providing. How many times did they not? Did they give the assessments we told you? Did they not? Every single thing is trackable in this system. If you were going to build a mousetrap, this is a good one. This is a really good mousetrap. They've done a very good job. Now, when the state goes through this, they talk all about, over and over and over again, they talk all about the connection between the curriculum, the standards, and the assessments. And they actually talk about required activities. There's a little chart. And it says, we're going to implement high-quality curriculum aligned with standards, assessments, curriculum, framework, instruction, materials, and interventions. Could you be any more plain? They're all connected. Now, if we were talking about times tables, that would be one thing. Are we talking about times tables? The Secretary of Education, Duncan, the Federal Secretary of Education, went to the Sustainability Summit, and he gave a speech. And in the speech, he said, the Education Department is just getting started in the important work of sustainability. It's been clear for a decade that education plays a vital role in the sustainability movement. In 1996, President Clinton's task force on sustainable development issued its goals. One of them stated that all Americans should have access to lifelong learning so they will understand the concepts involved in sustainable development. It's obvious we've fallen short. This week's Sustainability Summit represents the first time that the Department of Education is taking a leadership role in the work of educating the next generation of green citizens and preparing them to contribute to the workforce through green jobs. That's a political agenda.
Oh my God, you're right.
That's a political agenda. That is using our schools politically. See, when schools were local, you learned reading, writing, and arithmetic. And if you had a problem, you could move to the next school or a different teacher. Now it won't matter. This is politics entering the classroom. And they're very open about it. And the science standards that are being promoted are all about climate change, green energy, evolution, whatever is the latest cause du jour. That's politics in education. Schools aren't laboratories. It's not supposed to be about politics. And yet, that's what's happening. And you can't be any plainer than that, can you? Now, people say, that's a conspiracy. He said it in a speech. Put it on his website. It wasn't hidden at all. I didn't have to go to Sherlock Holmes. There it was. Very easy to find. Politics and education. The way that it works, we use the student data system. Students get a unique number. The data includes, according to the grant proposal, the data includes academic achievement, your health records, your family demographics, your parents' employment, your religious beliefs, everything about the student and their family. The students then can be divided into subgroups. All Latino students from single-parent families with an income of more than $40,000 a year. All white male students with from a two-parent family with an income of under $30,000 a year. That's a subgroup by demographics. And I can mix and match the demographics. The curriculum material has been tested to work with each demographic to make that demographic meet the outcome to the standard. Remember, the kid in the classroom can't hang up the phone. That's why pedagogy is important. The people doing this are not dumb. They know how education works. They talk about internationally benchmarked standards. The math standards move algebra back, like my kids took algebra in 8th grade, I bet a bunch of your kids probably did too. It moves back to 9th grade. If you take, the reason they moved it to 8th grade was to make room for calculus in high school. When we move it back to 9th grade, we just push calculus out of high school. The Algebra 2 standards don't include some of the elements of Algebra 2. It's a lowering down of Algebra 2. The English standards at the high school level are not literature-based. They're supposed to read informational texts, like President Obama's executive order on global warming. Why wouldn't you want to read literature? Or why would you? What's the purpose of literature? It's a common understanding of culture. Literature matters because it moves your heart. Did you ever read 1984? In 1984, I forget his name, the Big Brother character, talks about language. He talks about newspeak, which is the language. And what he says is, if we take words out of the culture, it's easier to control people. We think in words. If you don't have the word independence, you may have a vague feeling, but you can't share the thought. You can't define the feeling. You then can't share it with other people. So you can't mobilize people around you. If we think back to the U.S. Revolution, Thomas Paine wrote this little pamphlet called Common Sense. It was words that changed thoughts, that changed behavior. Thomas Jefferson wrote a document. Those are some of the most famous words in history. But without those words, that's what galvanized, what gave definition to the nation that we know as America. It defined it. Those are words. Whether you're Jewish or Christian or Muslim, your faith is defined in words. Which is interesting because I've actually read the Quran. I read it on the soccer field and the book was half one column in English and one column in Arabic. Because that's what I could get out of the library. And people walk by and I'm like, can you read Arabic? No. Did you convert? No. I just want to know what it says because the words matter. Everybody talks about Islam. Okay, what do they believe? How do I know what they believe? I can read the words. But in our schools today, for example, in Texas, the curriculum is called C-Scope. It's in 80% of the Texas schools. The little girls in 9th grade are required to, they made them wear burqas. These 14-year-old little girls, they put them in burqas, told them it was a fashion statement. Told them not to tell their parents. The jihadists were called freedom fighters. They interviewed a teacher. She said, I don't want to teach this, but my contract requires that I teach what I'm told to teach, and it also required that I couldn't tell the parents. Those are words. If we don't tell kids the truth, so what words are we giving them about Islam? Makes a big difference. If one entity, this is one entity that controls the words, they control the standards, the curriculum, and the assessments. It doesn't matter whether you like the words or not. If you give that control to one entity, they are not public schools, they are the government schools. We have just redefined education. And it really doesn't matter whether you agree with today's words or tomorrow's words or neither words. It's the control that you don't want to get rid of. It's the control. It moves all the way down to the preschool level in this grant. Now I have to tell you, some of the grant is funny. They talk about the schools that are the lowest performing, which of course are also the schools that probably have the biggest money problems. They call them turnaround schools, and every building will be required to hire a chief turnaround officer in addition to the principal. Where they're going to get the money for that, I don't know. It's kind of like, okay, that's just purely funny. Because it makes no sense. They can't pay their bills now. So some of it is funny. Pennsylvania told the Independent Regulatory Review Commission that it would cost, there was really no financial impact to implementing all of this. The IRC went, we don't really think so. They told the federal government it would cost $400 million. Even by government standards, I don't think that's nothing. That's, real money, as they say. $400 million. We got $43 million. Where are they getting the rest? They said they're leveraging other funds from other programs to make it work. That they're moving it from programs you thought you were paying for. Instead, they're paying for this. They said that the data system, well, will have an individual identifier for each student. Well, yeah, but see, nobody will be able to know what the student's number is. The students will never be individually identifiable. So we're going to track students we can't identify from preschool through elementary school, through secondary school, through post-secondary school, into the workforce and out of the workforce. And it will all be anonymous.
I don't think so.
Won't that just be amazing? How can you track somebody if you don't know who they are? We're going to track them from district to district without knowing who they are. We keep reading. Well, it's anonymous as applicable by state and federal law. The federal law is the FERPA, the Federal Education Rights and Privacy Act. This administration just defined the FERPA in their regulations to mean anyone who has what they call a legitimate educational interest. She can have access to the data, including researchers. The Bill Gates Foundation spent $100 million to help implement the database so that they can market it program promotion. We can market to our kids. And the Fed said, yeah, that's okay. People complain, the Fed said, no, that's okay. There's no expectation of privacy in student data, is what the ruling was. Did you know that?
Yeah.
But if you were a normal average parent, an average parent would know that. A normal average parent, I have a kindergarten kid. This is my first kid. He's 5, been in school. This is so cool. Watch my 5-year-old walk into school for the first time. I don't think that parent knows that that child's data and all the data on their family is now in a federal database. And it is in a federal database. How do I know that? Pennsylvania joined the testing consortium. The testing consortium is called CBAC, Smarter Balanced Assessment Consortium. We tell the feds we're a member of this. This organization has an agreement with the U.S. Department of Education. They got money. This then becomes a legal document in which they agree that they are going to share all the data from the assessments with the U.S. federal government. And it says so, this is a legal document, cooperative agreement, money changed hands. These are not public schools anymore. They are government schools. There's a huge difference in those two terms, a huge difference. So what do you do? Because that's a lot of bad news in a very short period of time. Contrary to what the gentleman said, don't get angry. Angry people are easy to control. Angry people are easy to get into a debate situation and then you look stupid. Don't do that. Start with your own kids. And this is challenging. If you are a teacher or school board member or an administrator in a school, stay. Fight as hard as you can, as long as you can. If you have children in a government school, take them out tomorrow. Because we don't put kids on the front lines of battlefields. They don't even know they're being attacked. They don't know what they don't know. They don't know that they're not hearing about Abraham Lincoln if they don't know who Abraham Lincoln was. They don't know that they're getting the wrong impression of American history if they don't know what the right one is. They don't know they're being attacked. I've seen curriculum, little kid curriculum, math question. 6 gay ghosts went up the hill, 4 gay ghosts came down. How many gay ghosts were left at the top of the hill? Why are we introducing the gay lifestyle to 7-year-olds? And when they even know to ask a question? No. That's propaganda. That's propaganda. And they don't know they're being propagandized. They don't know that. Those schools are becoming laboratories. The grant says that as this moves forward, well, then the schools will have to come together to identify students who aren't meeting the standards. And they will be put on a watch list, starting with the schools that are the lowest performing. They will be put on a watch list so that the teachers can monitor them and they can be given the additional socioeconomic and educational and social supports to help them comply, achieve. The word comply is never used, it's always achieve those standards to that outcome. So whose kids are those? And if necessary, they will be given an individualized education plan. That's an IEP, if you've ever been in special ed. So will they all be called special ed kids? The ones that don't comply, that don't meet the state content outcome to the state standard. This is ugly. And the teachers' unions have signed off on it. It's interesting, in California there was a teacher who was arrested for prostitution. And the teachers' union went to bat to save her job. But the teachers' unions are all in favor at the institutional level, like the state level and the national level, for having teachers who will not teach these outcomes to this standard. Those teachers, it's okay if they lose their jobs. Districts that don't comply will have a financial penalty. Districts that comply will get a reward. Once a district has signed a memorandum of understanding, they cannot opt out. And the database is to be shared with the U.S. Department of Labor. It's about workers, creating workers. You heard green energy jobs. Is that easy? No. So the first thing you have to do is protect, give me 5 minutes and then you can ask me any question you want. First thing you have to do is protect your own children. Take them out of the government's reach. And with all due respect, my kids all went to Catholic school. With all due respect to Catholic and Christian schools, they are being pushed into this system just like everybody else because the accreditation boards are moving toward it and the curriculum is moving toward it. It's getting harder and harder to find books that aren't aligned with the standards. So no matter where you go, that's all the books there are. That's what your kids will be taught. But in the interim, those schools are a good middle ground. And if they find tiny little publishing companies, you may be able to survive. And that is challenging, and I know that. And I'm sorry. I wish it was different. But it's not. Secondly, learn what's going on. As you leave tonight, I'll give you 2 handouts. My website is called Founded on Truth. It is a super PAC. Why is it a super PAC? Because super PACs are practically the only organization left with true freedom of speech. I can say whatever I want. And they can't stop me. Donations are not tax deductible. Okay. I can live with that. Because I have no restrictions. I don't have to deal with anybody but the Federal Election Commission, and my treasurer was Ronald Reagan's treasurer. So, we've both kind of been around since God was a baby. So, we know how to do this, and are both committed to this. Take the papers, go to the website and sign up. It's free. You'll get a book. I hope you enjoy it. You will also see, and you will begin to receive what's called Battle Lines, which is a weekly blog. This week's blog that just went out last night includes a videotape that I did in 1992 called Who Controls the Children. Some of you may have seen it, where I tracked this, the first time that I fought this battle, how they mined the data and how they manipulated the students. And this is the continuation of that. You're going to hear it and go, that's what she just said tonight. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. And then you will get weekly updates, weekly, maybe 6 days, maybe 8 updates, as I put things together for you, so that you have pieces to work with. Talk to your legislator. If you do, talk from the contracts. There is a mountain of information out there. You could go into overload in 2 minutes. Just like, there's too much. And no legislator is going to read all of that. But they all know that those contracts are legally binding documents, and they are readily available. The federal government has been very nice. They're all on their website. If you go to Google or Bing or whoever you use, and you type in state applications race to the top, boom, you'll find Pennsylvania's application right there. It is irrefutable. Use documents that are legal, because then they can't refute you. And then you don't get lost in a mountain of information. I will be taking a lot of what we just said and putting it together for you in a way that fits together. The longitudinal data system is done. Pennsylvania told the federal government there were 12 pieces that were mandated by the America Competes Act. We have done all 12 of them. The document says met. We've done them all. The data system is in place here in Pennsylvania. So, learn about it. Share with others. Whether it's family, friends, start talking about it. In teeny little bits. Little bits. Otherwise, people run screaming for the nearest closet and say they're not coming out until Gabriel blows his trumpet. And I kind of don't blame them. So, little bits. As you get an opening, walk through. Stay connected with others. Talk to elected people. Elected people can always override bureaucratic people. They almost never choose to. They always have the ability to. Now you need to know here in Pennsylvania, this first application was signed by Ed Rendell. Phase 3 was signed by Tom Portman. This is bipartisan insanity. So don't assume because the person has either a D or an R after their name that they're either going to agree or disagree with you. And when you lobby, listen. Your hot button issue might be that these standards came from the federal government. The elected representative's hot button issue might be the data mining. Listen to what floats their vote and talk about that. Years ago, I was lobbying in Washington on a pro-life bill, and a bunch of reps that were normally never voted for anything pro-life gave us a budget vote. Wow, they changed their position. And I thought, I don't believe that. So I went back and asked them. And they said, oh, we don't care about that. We appropriated money to Washington, D.C. that they were supposed to use to fix potholes, and they didn't fix potholes, and my car fell in the pothole and my axle broke. So I'm taking away their money until they fix those potholes. Okay, you can do the right thing for the reason of your choice. Listen to what is their hot button, because that makes you a better lobbyist. You are the advocates. And the final thing is, do not be discouraged. In 1992, when I first got involved in the OVE issue, way back when I was young, we were in exactly the same position that we are right now. It had passed the State Board of Education. The legislature was saying, we don't want anything to do with that. The governor thought he was in favor of it. It was in front of the Independent Regulatory Review Commission. It was happening in every state. We won. We beat them. It's 20 years later, and now they're trying, it took them 20 years to get back to where they were 20 years ago. I debated this literally in every state but Hawaii. I was even in Alaska. I hasn't said poor planning. I was in Louisiana in August and North Dakota in February, which was kind of poor planning on my part. But the point was, when parents and citizens and teachers stood up, they won. We beat them. Do not be discouraged. Do not give up. This is a winnable battle. It will not be an easy one, but it is a winnable one. And finally, as we heard at the beginning, pray. Grace is always equal and more stronger and mightier than power. The government has power. Those who pray have grace. If you think about it, most of us probably follow a faith that began with 11 guys in a room who had just lost their leader on a cross, wondering what were they going to do next. And on the other side of the fence was the Roman Empire, the mightiest empire on earth. And if you had been a betting man in 40 AD, you'd have bet on the Roman Empire, as would everybody else. It's 2,000 years later. Have you seen the Roman Emperor lately? But that faith is still here. That faith is still here. Grace is always mightier than power. This is a nation that was founded under God. The standard was legal and wrong isn't good enough. That is the standard that we are continuing to uphold. Those folks 200 years ago were up against the mightiest empire of their time too. And if you had been a betting person, you wouldn't have been with them either. Valley Forge hardly inspired confidence in the eyes of the world. They didn't even have shoes or food or heat. They didn't have money. They didn't have anything. We want this. Because grace is always mightier than power. It's the same God and the same grace. If we will just stand up and fight, we will have the same outcome. Thank you.
We're going to move this mic around tonight because it's air conditioning and it's making it difficult to listen. Let's go back here.
Yes, ma'am.
Hi. Some of us in the room are homeschooling parents.
Uh-huh.
And do you have any suggestions how to light a fire under the homeschoolers that we deal with? Because I tried to get a lot of people here tonight unsuccessfully.
And they think their kids are safe.
Yeah, and I see the reality of it. I don't know what to say to them to try to...
Right at this moment as we speak, it's kind of funny, the same Obama administration who has no trouble with illegal aliens climbing over the fence that doesn't exist from Mexico are trying very desperately to deport a German couple who came here because they're homeschooling. And in the court brief that the administration filed, what they said is that the federal government should have the right to determine who should homeschool and who should not.
Oh.
And that should, it's like, guys, do you understand they're after your kids too? And that's a very important thing. You just have to keep beating on them. The other thing is that the federal government, in the grant application, and I don't remember what page it's on anymore, the state told the feds that they were going to be working with the post-secondary institutions to make admissions dependent upon kids meeting the Common Core standards. So if you want to get into college, then the post-secondary institutions are going to have to comply as well. That they have to, and if I can find the actual page, I will attempt to do that to you while I'm answering other questions. But yeah, they're going to try to get the post-secondary schools. And if they don't, and the schools get, like they're a state institution, they won't get state money. So it's a huge stick to force the post-secondary institutions to comply as well.
Another thing that I would add to that is, and something I'll send to you via email, is there is an organization that's done an excellent job of evaluating curriculums as to whether they have purposely complied with Common Core, whether they are coincidentally in compliance with Common Core, meaning that they may, in their curriculum, use other curriculum publishers who are aligned, I guess the right word is aligned.
Yeah.
Aligned with Common Core, and then those who have deliberately said they will not align themselves with Common Core. That's out there. We'll put that out to all of you, and you'll be surprised at some of the standard Christian school, homeschool publishers who are aligning themselves with Common Core, including Matthew C., Calvert, Bob Jones University Press, which I used to use, not deliberately aligning themselves. Well, actually, their language leaves that kind of open to interpretation.
There's a huge financial incentive too, because you can sell to more people. But New York State, which is ahead of us in implementation, in their, what they told the curriculum companies was, if you develop the curriculum aligned to the standards, you have to give it to us for free. You lose all copyright laws. And then they will give it to all the states. And in the Pennsylvania document, it says, well, every school district isn't participating, but we'll provide the curriculum, and these districts are so strapped for cash that they'll just use it because they won't be able to afford to do anything else. So if the post-secondary institutions are aligned and the curriculum companies are all moving toward it, homeschoolers are really going to be stuck. And that's a difficult thing. Yes, ma'am?
Do you suggest that we boycott any kind of standard testing, such as the PSSAs, or like not take our kids to schools?
You're allowed to opt out of the PSSAs, I would, just to make a statement. Standardized testing on its face, remember we talked about like the Iowa test, it's not bad. It's good to know where your kids go in a national, but the problem with the PSSAs is you don't really know what they're testing and it's an internal audit. I would opt my kid out because I'm not allowed to see the test they're taking, and I don't know if it's actually testing reading or like the example if it's testing honesty. Pennsylvania's history in testing is very ugly. In the 60s, the original test was called the Educational Quality Assessment. Parents were told it was testing citizenship. What would you think? Who signed the Declaration of Independence? Citizenship. Thresholds for behavior change. The question said, this is a real question. It was actually in the documents. It was their sample. A group called the Midnight Marauders went out and spray painted and did vandalism. I would join the group if my best friend was a member. I would join the group if all the popular kids did it. I would join the group if, or not join the group if my parents punished me if they found out. There was no place to say I would not do it. You had to say under what conditions you would do it. The test, it also tested for what they called adaptability to change without protest. That's a quote, that's what they tested for. Parents thought it was citizenship. Real question, my parents were moving to another city or state. How much time would you spend on each of the following? Crying, being upset, getting ready for new things. What they were seeing was how open is the child to change without being upset or without protest. And the EQA then came with what were called validated learning packets. The school districts they got results back from the EQA. They had to model their curriculum in a 5-year plan to do better on the EQA. And how do you do that? Well, the state gave them what were called validated learning packets, which was curriculum introduced for the particular subgroup of students in your district to make them do better on the EQA the next time. How do we know that all happened? Because a woman named Anita Hogue had a son in 8th grade who came home and said, "Oh, we took the weirdest test today. It was really kind of bizarre." And she went down to the school thinking, "Yeah, you're nuts. You know, you came home, you're a kid, you came home with a story." She went down to the school to say, "He can have a really weird story, can I see the test?" And they said, "No." And she said, "Well, you've already taken it, so it's not like I can cheat." No. No is definitely not the correct response. I'm a mother. No. She had to file a Freedom of Information Act request to get it, eventually filed a complaint with the U.S. Department of Education, and she won. And the U.S. Department of Education made Pennsylvania enter into a consent agreement in the late 1980s. So they gave this test from the 60s all the way up to the late 1980s, to say they wouldn't do it anymore. Except Pennsylvania, in their own document, said, well, they were suspending the EQA so they could roll it into the PSSA. So would I opt my kids out of that test in 1 second?
And the other question is, are on your list of schools that are already signed?
I have a list, so you are free to come up and look when this is done. I will leave it open on the table for you. Because there's 122 of them, and the state did not put them in any order whatsoever.
You know, the districts tell you that you can't even take your child on vacation during PSSA.
You have
So
legal right to opt
I
out.
didn't know that our kids had that right.
Yes. That was when in a debate with the Secretary of Education, the original language said parents had a right to request that the children opt out. And he said, well, in this debate, he said, well, see? And I said, it says they have a right to request that they opt out. He said, exactly. I said, I have 6 children and every night they request a lollipop. And every night I say no. Parents have the right to request the lollipop. And the language changed. So you have an absolute right to opt out.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. If I can, I just kind of want to circle back because we're in a very similar scenario as this young lady over here that I have a little one and my wife and I have decided that we're going to have to start doing some homeschooling or something. But I just wanted to clarify 2 quick points.
Okay.
When, I had you spinning with all this information, and thank you for coming to share it all, but the level of indoctrination is so spooky in regard, I listened to my 8-year-old niece come home from school and tell my brother and my sister-in-law that in 20 years they have to kill themselves. She said, why? What you talk? She said, well, they're teaching us that in 20 years the rainforest is going to be done, we won't have any oxygen to breathe, so I'd rather kill myself than suffocate to death. So that was my deciding point. I said, that's it, So what I'm asking is, you had mentioned a couple things that there's unrealistic goals, that these unrealistic goals, when it comes around, that are unattainable, and the lack of funding is not going to be there because those goals were not met. Do you suppose like the whole system might just crash and maybe a homeschooling would be the best bet? But at the same time, isn't the homeschooling, I don't kind of ask you to judge the future here, but the homeschooling, is it really, it is the best route to go. I know it's pointed away from what's happening today, but that's going to eventually, the kids at homeschooling are going to have the same tests and same answers to give on tests in order to do anything, correct? Is there an identification number as well with
Yes.
the homeschooling student?
Yes, but it's not the same, exactly. Because they don't have the same data, because Pennsylvania's homeschooling law gives you such leeway that they can't collect it. It's not there to be collected because of the way Pennsylvania's homeschooling law is structured. Now, there was a movement, and you're from the eastern side of the state, so Senator Kim Ward, who's from the western side of the state, actually introduced a bill that attempted to sort of try to tighten up on, and a bunch of her constituents went in and said, haha, no, you're not doing that. And she said she would withdraw the bill. So there is actually an effort to try to tighten up, but right now, the law in Pennsylvania gives you, you go to your own supervisor, and the supervisor signs off, and that's what you take to the superintendent. You don't show the superintendent the books, you don't show the superintendent the work, you just show your supervisor that person. And you can pick your supervisor. There is an organization called the Pennsylvania Homeschool Association. The Richmonds run it. I would use them. They're very reputable. We homeschooled my one daughter. She's a ballerina. She's a principal dancer she's 27. She's a ballerina. She actually is. She's a principal dancer at Madison Valley, Wisconsin. And to make room for that, because she was a professional at 17, we had to homeschool high school. And so Howard is a friend of mine, and we went through him. So she has Pennsylvania Homeschool Association gives you a diploma, which is recognized at every college. But you can use whatever curriculum you want. You have certain standards you have to meet, but you can pick your books. You have a lot of latitude, and they stand between you and the state, and they do a very good job. And Howard is a really good guy. I've known him for years. So I would use that. If the homeschool movement gets big enough, and it is growing every year, it will actually become a good escape route, which is why the government is so upset about it, because it's like getting much more large every single year as people pull their kids out. It's a race. Will it eventually fall in? Do you remember the Soviet Union?
Yeah.
Well, they did a lot of damage while they were dying. And so it's, I would rather not go through all of the damage if I could possibly avoid it.
I'm asking for more help. My daughters aren't here tonight. I would drag them here screaming and whatever else. If something like this could be rescheduled. And I bet everyone here is thinking that. If this could be rescheduled, it would be packed. Secondly, what are you doing to duplicate yourself I mean, seriously.
I know.
Seriously.
That's-
And thirdly, is there any help available to pastors and priests of ways to speak to their congregations about this?
Okay, third question first, not that I'm aware of. Can we reschedule? Yes, Saturday I was on the western part of the state, I will be in
Where will you
Derry.
be next? Maybe that's close.
I'm on the other side of the state for a little while. However, I'm meeting with my treasurer, the radio guy, on Tuesday to put together a system inside the website that has open days so people can start to schedule me. I am not free, you have to pay to get me there, and it helps fund the organization. I'm not expensive, but I'm not free either. The money doesn't go to me, it goes to the org, but you know what I mean. But that will all, we're meeting next week to put that on the website. I'm a little behind, you don't know, I fell a week ago, and I think I broke a little bone in my shoulder, which they don't do anything about, but say, oh, how sad for you. But I mean, I couldn't drive a car for a week. It hurts, but I at least can drive now, and I have a stick, so it was kind of messy. And I'm a klutz. I shouldn't wear high heels. It's my fault. But I'm a little bit behind, just because I had to take a little bit out for that. But we're putting that together, so that will be available probably within like 10 days, how fast the web guy does it. The middle question, am I duplicating me? We're working on it. What I did when we call it OBE was, I began to teach people the questions that you ask to which there are no answers, to force the truth to come out. I'm still reading the applications and to get the questions. The last time around, I became a verb. Departments of Education actually wrote to each other and said, we got Luksik, because they began to recognize the questions. And so, yes, it is possible to do that. It just takes a little while. I have to read several states to get the common questions, and I will be working on that over the next, but that'll take a little bit of time because they're really long. As I travel, what happens is people step up and say, I want to learn it, and then I start teaching as I go. This time, technology is more advanced, so I can use the website, and we will be doing a big video like Who Controls the Children, only updated, a series of 10 minutes, and then a series of 2 minutes, so that people have, okay, my daughter won't sit for an hour. Will she sit for 2 minutes? So we start kind of like, the trailer for the movie, and then the short, and then the movie. So we start moving people forward that way. That depends on how fast I raise the money to be able to make that all possible, so it has a decent production value, so people can see it. If you look at Who Controls the Children, it was in the early 1990s. It's on YouTube. It's on my website now. The production value is terrible because that was what was available 22 years ago. But the information's okay. But now we can upgrade production value. So we're talking to some producers to work on that. And as fast as I raise the money, I will be doing that. So it's a process of this month. Pardon me?
Is there already a budget for that?
The first video, they're telling me I can do it for under 10,000, which is for an hour long, is very good. And I want to start with the master one because that's where you give people, when you watch a television series, there's a little
Where are you
march.
finding the video? Where are you finding the producers? In Pittsburgh?
Actually, there's one right in Johnstown that I've worked with before who's very good, and there's one in Wisconsin, of all places, that I've worked with before. Both of them are very good, and not looking to make a fortune. Like some of the big boy producers, yeah, we'll do it, but we want 50 grand. You need somebody who actually knows what they're doing, but is willing to work with you.
Will Bob Jones do it for free?
You can't get the production value out of it. It just doesn't look the same as when you pay somebody to do it. We tried that before. Because they import the data and stuff. Yes?
But on the same topic, just in the meantime, while you're working on the high quality one, do you have any recordings or DVDs of just you speaking like you are tonight? Is that available?
They just did it. So
Okay.
there it is. Yes, sir.
I don't either. I speak loud enough. Hi, Jamie. Okay.
What is the possibility of going through? I mean, a total abolition of the Department of Education, just leave it up to local school districts to do with as they will?
If we're politically smart, better than 50%. It depends on how politically smart we are doing this.
Because why do we need a state, or even if everybody's focused on the federal, why do we need Pennsylvania Department of Education?
Actually, because Pennsylvania state constitution says that the state has a responsibility to assure the education of all the students. It's in our state constitution, and it has always been there. Now, you can argue with that, but that's why we have a state department, because it's in our state constitution. but not the federal.
Okay, but we don't need the Department of Education to still require education.
Well, that becomes, but you're asking me, why does the state have one?
Okay. Oh,
Your
okay.
justification is it's in the state,
But
education
there's
is
a
the
possibility
responsibility
of
of
going
the
through the throat and then
state. If we
restoring.
put this together correctly, but you can't start, like, you kind of, it's like you have to climb the mountain one step at a time.
The Rand Paul budget in the Senate right now abolishes the Department of Education at the federal level.
Yes, it does. The Rand Paul budget.
That will not happen at least the next 2 years, the next 3 years.
But this is a different way, like, this may give, if we put the stuff, and some of this is, I have to go back and I haven't, the amount of data is overwhelming, to go back and mine, okay, how did we do before we had the federal department, and then track, the big money from the federal government is actually not Race to the Top, which is, Race to the Top was $4.35 billion, and that is not the big money. The big money is the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, that's the Title I money, and that makes Race to the Top look like a baby. And that's where you have to start tracking, and that's a huge project.
I'm going to steal the floor just a moment, wait, just a moment.
We gotta move along.
I was your Richland Township coordinator back in '92, when you were out
There you
there.
go.
So Rick Roth. Anyway, what I want to point out is, how many people here from Richland Township? Anybody here from Richland Township? Okay, make sure you read your township newsletter. We have an article every 6 months in about the happenings in Quakertown Community School District. Several of board members or would-be members are here tonight.
Good,
But we will put an article in the next issue. It goes to about 6,000 households.
wonderful,
So about to capsulize what you said here tonight. And,
terrific. And then send them to my website, so they can find more information.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
But I have a cautionary tale for everybody in this room. I am not an educator, but I've taught a collegiate program in another field. And I want to tell you that this lack of privacy, this data mining, is taking control from the people who know the job, is called the Affordable Health Care Act. An act that the same model, the same thing is now affecting your health care. You're going to be data mined, the physician's going to be pulled out of your care program. Everything she said applies to health care.
Yes, it does.
She is very right about that. Okay, other questions?
Mr. Gentleman in the back.
A school board member and I went out and visited with Bob and to talk about this stuff. And I've also been on the phone with Rita Perez, who's in charge of teaching learning and PDE. All right, I've taught in Quakertown for 33 years. I teach at Bucks County Community College now, and I've seen a huge decline in my time. All right, and what I asked Rita Perez was, are we able here to establish whatever curriculum we choose? She said, and they're saying yes, as long as we still have to meet the standards. So is she wrong then that we cannot do that? I mean, like, why could we not establish Singapore math or something like that?
Because you won't pass the assessment. The assessments are going to drive everything. And since the curriculum will be available online, then the districts will use it. When I debate it and somebody says that, this is how I answer them. In my backyard, I put a Cessna airplane. See it? There it is in my backyard. You can build, you can use any tools, you can use any materials, you can do whatever you want, but in the end, you have to build a Cessna airplane. In the end, will what you do be exactly what I do? Yes, or you won't have a Cessna airplane. If I control the standards and the test, I control the curriculum.
Okay, like, are you familiar with E.D. Hirsch?
Yes.
Your Quakertown. They say that their curriculum, which has been pretty good, solid curriculum, fulfills pretty much the core standards.
E.D. Hirsch actually testified against these standards, saying as soon as you mandate Common Core standards, achievement goes down. And all education narrows to the standards themselves.
Right.
So yes, he's actually an opponent of this system, which is kind of funny because he talked about Common Core learning in his books, but it wasn't mandated. It was, these are the kind of things you should be including along with other things. This is saying this is all you can include. You can't do anything but this. The teachers are actually being handed scripts. This is what you're supposed to say.
Oh,
Yes.
yeah.
I'd like to point out that this gentleman, Dwight Anderson, was one of the best science teachers that this school district here in Quakertown ever had, attested to by many students, and he was virtually fired by the administration at the high school because he complained about the failure to teach the fundamentals to the kids as they were coming through the district that could not handle basic math functions and that kind of things for his high school courses. He's now on the school board, and if you want to make a difference, folks, every single one of us in this room can do something.
Right.
We cannot all run for the school board, but you can work for somebody who's running for the school board.
And you should give
If
him
you're
a
in
hand.
Quakertown,
That's a hero. Good for you.
And-
Congratulations. Okay, next. Wait till we're done.
82% of the people in the region voted for him on the Republican side, and 53% voted for him on the Democratic side. Highest record vote.
Good for you.
so if you're in Quakertown School District, make sure you meet these other two gentlemen. I assume, Dwight, that they are in concurrence with your views on education, which have been profitable to the district. We have a couple more minutes, one or two more questions.
There's a gentleman.
I concur with getting involved. I hold 4 offices in Lehigh County, and I'm a council supervisor for Luksik Township. And what I've been doing is starting mutual aid groups. And the purpose of that, it's a 3-tier structure. Tier 1 is 3 to 6 families. Tier 2 is a 5-mile radius. Tier 3 is Lehigh County, Berks County, and some of the farm and people up in Northampton County. What we're doing is we are doing this thing in groups, learning about this kind of stuff. That's why I'm here.
Good idea.
Because I want to learn more about it. To all the things that are taking away our liberties, all the threats that we have converging, it's too much for most people. It's overwhelming for most people. So what we do in our mutual aid groups, and I go into areas and teach this stuff, is we set up these groups. And within a group structure, we have monthly meetings, but we also have meetings in homes every week. In a group structure, we engage it together, and we do things like buying food in bulk, where you're actually paying about 1/3
Good idea.
in the store. And we teach each other a lot of skills, and we share skills, and we help each other. And we have everything, like in our tier 2 groups, we have doctors, we have everything. This is how you mitigate this, because nobody can do everything anymore, so we have to work together. And might I also say, that's what the Word of God teaches us. The Word of God tells us, you shall know them for their love one for another, and that they share things common. We're not talking about welfare, we're not talking about entitlement. We're talking about spreading out the load. Because I'm in the automotive business. I've been in the automotive business for 36 years. I could do things that some of you can't do, and everybody in this room can do something that I can't do. So what we do is we network together.
Good
If
job.
anybody wants any help in setting up your mutual aid group, I'd be willing to do that for you.
Thank you. That's excellent. Good idea.
That's one great way
One
to
every
take
night.
action. Last question.
Actually, you want to comment, you mentioned sustainability.
Yes.
One of these mantras. My son's at Moravian College. I've watched over the past year the emails coming from the college on sustainability. There's now 4,000 college presidents across the nation that have signed on to sustainability. And I've watched as it's progressed from changing light bulbs, saving the college $20,000 in electric bills. Just last month, the email came out, and college professors were saying that they've now reached a point where the students are indoctrinated. That's the word they use. They're indoctrinated, and they're now freely mentioning sustainability issues in the various projects that they do in all the classes across the college campus. And they didn't waste any time. In the very same email, they started to move from environmental justice to social and economic justice, discussing redistribution of wealth and elimination of private property. On our college campuses, this is coming right now. It's happening faster than we can.
It's very quick. It is quick.
Yeah,
But
and
they haven't had really any opposition, so it'll be interesting to see what happens when somebody talks back.
my daughter's at Messiah College. They just opened an office of sustainability this last year. So, folks, if you're not familiar with that, you need to Google Agenda 21, And we can resend to you the video of the meeting that we had last year on Agenda 21. But we will be doing a meeting in the future on that topic as well. This is a very critical information, a UN agenda for really exerting total control. So I think we better end with that.
On the way out, there's 2 handouts. Please take one of each. That gives you where my website is, talks a little bit just about some of what's happening in education. The other one is if you want to get involved, you can mail it back to me. Everything is there. If you go to Amazon and Google my name talking about health, I wrote a book called Parent's Guide to Effective Reading Instruction. It tells you how to pick a reading curriculum. You don't need, just go to Amazon, Google Luksik, you'll find it. It's very easy.
And folks, our next meeting is May 14th. We are still talking about what we want to do as far as the topic. I'm very concerned that with the wealth of information that we're getting here tonight, we don't just go home and do nothing because we're so overwhelmed, we don't know what to do. So it may be a meeting where we are revisiting this and trying in a practical way to give every one of you something you can go home and do. In the meantime, watch your emails because we will be sending information links to you about Common Core and information from PegLuksik. We video this meeting tonight, so we will send you that. You can get that out to all of your friends. You can get that out to your church group or whatever. So please come back second Tuesday in May. And don't forget Jerry Byer right there, waving her hand, is our treasurer and has deep pockets. And we would appreciate your support. Thank you so much to, yes, what? Oh, if you have a ballot, if you are a voting member of CCG and you have a ballot in your hand, would you please drop it off at the main table here on your way out? We do need to finalize the election for next year. Thank you so much to Dr. PegLuksik. Let's give her a hand for all of her work over the last 20 years.